and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast.
Board Game 2017 Extravaganza of 2017. My eyes, Georgios, my eyes, they're full of the glitter.
All right, you are not going to put your own makeup on again then.
I can't believe the glitz, Georgios, the gowns.
Yes.
Who are you wearing today?
I'm not Buffalo Bill. I'm not wearing anyone.
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me.
No.
Why not, Georgios? This is gala night. We're going to go to the after party at Giorgio Armani's house.
One of the worst pop references you've ever made.
And I tell you, it's great, because what's the hot party? Is it Knizia's Math Bash? Or is it Simon's Miniature Marvel after the ceremony, Georgios? Which one are you going to go to?
I think I'm going to go to the Kramer and Kiesling board game extravaganza where you sit down and just marvel at the many, many versions of games they've put out and just drink. There's no gaming, just drinking.
Just drinking and looking at the lack of theme, Georgios.
Yes. It's like being Neo in the Matrix. You just look at it and just see the numbers. Everything is just numbers.
It's an anti-theme party, Georgios.
Pretty much,
You go dressed as blokes in clothes and women in clothes.
Yes, that is true.
All right, so basically, this is the Board Game Perfect Information Extravaganza. We have hired the Chinese Theatre in downtown Hollywood for this, Georgios.
Unfortunately, we're still in Berlin, so it's empty.
But, if you want to go into a room...
Yeah, you can do that now.
A dark room and listen to an echo.
That is, you can do that.
You can do that. If you're in downtown Hollywood right now listening to this, because it's live...
It's live.
Go down to the Chinese Theatre.
Yes,
demand to be let in. Now, you've got a password.
Yeah, the password, yeah.
And the password is, I am carrying a fucking gun, let me in here. If you say that to them, they'll just let you swan right in. What's the password again, Georgios?
I'm not legally allowed to tell you.
But you heard what I said. Go and do it.
Okay.
So, basically, what have we got in store for the listeners tonight, Georgie?
We have here the third annual inaugural celebration of the Perfect Information.
Inaugural means first, Georgios. You can't have the third inaugural.
Thank you for stopping my joke. I knew what those words meant. They were put there on purpose.
I was demonstrating to the listeners that I know a long word like inaugural, Georgios.
Yes, you know that. You know that indeed. I did not.
I can pronunciate it as well.
Yes, you can. And I can totally tell that this time you didn't write it into the palm of your hand. You wrote it onto your thigh.
Interestingly, before we met, tattooed it into the palm of my hand, just coincidentally, because I liked the look of the word. I'm a bit of a synesthesius. It looked like strawberry cheesecake to me. And I like to look at strawberry cheesecake a lot, so I just tattooed it there. Inaugural.
Epidural, yes. Yes, we're going to have a great show. All the greats are here. That guy from that store who did that thing.
That's right.
He's there.
He sat on the front row there. If you look, there's the camera. Wave to the camera, Jack.
I think at some point we really need to tell these people this is an audio podcast.
Yeah, but I like the fact that they're waving.
Yeah, that is true. Hey, great to see you too. Anyway, yeah, we're going to have a bunch of awards. We're going to talk about the very best games, experiences, game-like things of 2017, because 2017 is a year that we are currently in.
It is indeed. So before we go over to the ceremony, Georgios, which, spoiler, is just going to be us doing this.
That's not a spoiler.
Before we go over to the... It sounds like an outside broadcast, Georgios, all right? Before we go over to the ceremony, to our host, Hugh Jackman, we are going to...
I'm still convinced that this is his porn name.
Did we get Hugh Jackman?
Yes, we did.
How much did we pay for Hugh Jackman?
Well, nothing. He doesn't know that yet. We're going to run away.
Oh, but how much did you offer him? 5 penneth and a bag of figs?
I don't know what that is in Australian dollars.
Probably 9.
Yeah, they probably offered him that, yeah.
So before that, we're going to talk about the year as a whole, the year in review.
Yes, as a whole, as in, something bottomless that things fall into.
So, Georgios.
Hope, for example.
What did you think of 2017 as a year in gaming?
Ooh, as a year in gaming. It's been a year where I've gamed games. kind of.
Great.
I know, it's amazing. We've been to Essen again, which was also great.
It wasn't. It was fucking horrendous. I was ill as shit.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
It's the regard in which you hold me, Georgios, that just keeps me coming back.
I'm not entirely sure what to think of the year as a whole. As a gaming experience, I think it was very interesting. There were a lot of interesting things happening. We've viewed a lot of very interesting games. I've said interesting a lot. I think people are starting to clue in onto the fact that I'm not quite sure which adjectives to use.
But if you want to talk about the quality of the games that have come out in 2017, how do you feel it compares to previous years?
I don't think I've played any games that came out this year that I thought were really bad. I think the number of games that I was disappointed in, I can count on one hand.
Right. You do actually have 75 fingers on the one hand, though, don't you?
Yes, that is true. Technically, that is true. So
it really helps with addition.
It's really hell if you're trying to put on gloves, though.
That's true. Really expensive in war.
Yeah. No, I think most of the games I've played were, not all of them were, I think, interesting enough to own. But all of them I've played were interesting to play at least once.
Now, I know you have a sort of instinctive refusal to agree with me, sort of on a DNA level. But if I was to fire an adjective at you, I'd wonder whether you would agree with this when I describe the year.
Well, the way you've set it up, I would have to say no.
Exactly. Yeah. But solid. How do you think the word solid works as a descriptor to this year?
I think it's underselling this year.
Do you?
Yeah, I think it's better than solid. I will agree with you that, much like my experience of Essen, there were no high peaks. There were no games that blew everyone away. There were some nice surprises. There were games that kind of came out of nowhere and were really, really good, but there were no games I completely fell in love with. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I don't need each year to offer me at least one game I fall in love with. But there were so many games that I played, I thought, oh, this is really fun. I'd love to play it again. I don't need to buy it, but because shelf space is limited. But this is really good. This is really fun. I mean, if you're up for another game at some point, I'd love to play it again. There were a bunch of those games.
I played a bunch of games that made me feel warm and satisfied.
Was that because that was the first time you wore pants?
Heat of the game. It was really good. But also, I think you're right. There has been nothing I've played this year that I've thought, wow. So take Nusfjord, for example. Mm-hmm. Okay. I played Nusfjord once and I thought, yeah, it's okay. I played it twice and I thought, nah, it's fine. Then I played it a couple of more times and I thought, no, this is solid, actually. This is satisfying. I come out of this game feeling good.
All right.
And I think the adjective solid, for my viewpoint, is a perfect descriptor for this year. I find a lot of games, Heaven and Ale, Nusfjord especially. I think Essen this year was about unapologetically about Euro games in a way that in previous years it's been about sort of new innovations. And I think it was solidly, Kiesling's got 3 games there. Uwe Rosenberg's got 2 games there. Stefan Feld's got a game there. Rainer Knizia is releasing games there. Euro games were the motif of Essen, I felt. And all the ones I've played were fine. But I think it's interesting that the one...
Fine is a dangerous adjective.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't want that... I don't want to damn them with faint praise.
Yeah.
Because I think I've really enjoyed a lot of games that came out this year. But I think it's very telling that the game I came away from this year thinking, bloody hell, was not a game released this year.
Oh yeah, same here.
Concordia was the game that stole my heart this year.
Concordia blew me away as well. Yeah.
And, it's not going to be on my list, spoilers, because I wanted to talk about games from this year. And there's debates on release dates for games. But, Concordia, I discovered it this year and I adored it. All of the games I sort of got from Essen and things have been fine. And they will stay in my collection and they will be played, especially Nusfjord, because it's accessible and it's easily graspable, but it has that sort of, I think it's Uwe Rosenberg back to some semblance of form after being sort of very unfocused in the last couple of years.
I think A Feast for Odin is amazing.
And again, a caveat for all you people out there, I've yet to play it, so I can't really comment on that one. But, a few of his games have seemed to be this big sandbox that you go into, and he doesn't guide you through the experience, whereas Nusfjord is back to that, a more constrained, a more railroady idea But that's the kind of games I prefer. But I have not, as I said, the only game I fell in love with was a game that was released 3 years ago, right?
Yeah. I think if I were to say something somewhat negative about this year, I think most of the games we've discovered this year, not all of them, but most of them are not going to be considered milestones or classics.
No.
None of them will be considered bad. I think they will find their niche. They will find groups that love them. But I think I doubt there will be much of a consensus of games coming out this year where people go, this is the classic. This is the year that X came out. And that's been talk of the town ever since.
Well, I think it's a testament.
Everybody talks about this game that came out in 2017.
I think it's a testament to the industry somewhat. It doesn't feel like there's been peaks and troughs this year. It feels like it's been consistently good. That is, it just shows how professional the industry is becoming. So you don't have peaks and troughs. You have a sort of consistent high level, but then within that, it's very hard then to find those things that really go over the top.
Do you think that this has partly to do with us now doing reviews for more than 2 years? Do you think there's a certain, it's not cynicism, but
ennui?
I wouldn't even call it ennui, just, you're too familiar with things. You have too many points of comparison that these things don't surprise you anymore.
The thing is, though, I was thinking about this literally just a minute ago.
All right. I could tell you were breathing very heavily.
And my first sort of classic year for games was 2012. Which happens to coincide with the year I really started gaming properly, right? So there's an obvious correlation between those two facts. Because I remember that because I think anyone will agree that when you first get into the hobby, there's this sort of wide-eyed discovery and kind of you love everything, right?
Yeah.
But I've played a lot of games in the subsequent 5 years, right? And before we had a podcast, I've played a lot of games and gamed regularly. Yet my next top year, I think, is a legitimately classic year for games, which is 2015. And I think 2015 has been hard to beat. And so I don't think it's my world weariness or my cynicism or my simple just used to playing games idea. I think it's much more because it didn't happen with Concordia. Suddenly Concordia made me feel like I felt before. Now, it doesn't happen as regularly as it did when I first started gaming, but I think that it does happen when the game encourages that.
Yeah. I think I remember I've been thinking a lot about my game of the year pick from last year, and now actual spoilers. There is no game of the year in this show. Dun dun dun.
Oh my God, George, really?
Yes.
I've got 20 games of the year down here. What have I been doing for the last 7 hours?
I don't know, counting up to 20.
And you know how difficult that is for me, Georgios.
Well, that's why you took off your socks.
I'm number lexic.
Basically, I was thinking about my game of the year pick of last year, which was Flamme Rouge. And there was a time where I sort of doubted this pick. Afterwards, where I was really excited when I first played it. I'm still very excited. Every time I play it, I feel like, oh no, this is worth it. I think I still stand by my choice. This is the best game that came out last year. But occasionally I do doubt it when I hear other people talk about the game. When I hear them talk about, I don't know, it's a bit simple. It's a bit this, it's a bit that. It doesn't seem very engaging. And I think a lot of it really has to do with comparisons, with contrasts, with, both with what your expectations are, but also what your comparisons are. What is your, what is the prism through which you see all these games, through which you evaluate these games? And I'm not talking about personal preference. I'm not particularly interested in that kind of argument. I'm talking about there's certain things that you value that consider strength in gaming, strength in game experience or strength in game design, good game design, good experience, as opposed to bad game design and bad experience. And, ultimately, that might be a horrible elitist thing to say, but I think there's some things that most people can agree upon are good decisions. And
absolutely. I think you can cut personal preference out of that. I think there is that element. And it happens in all forms of art, right?
Yeah.
You can say, no, I see why.
Yeah.
I see why that's great.
Exactly.
Not my bag, but I see it.
Exactly. And I think the way that decisions are brought up in Flamme Rouge from last year is very interesting, very engaging, and the elegance with which this is achieved excited me then and excites me still. I think the last year sort of helped me sharpen my eye for these kind of moments, that also sharpened my understanding of why I'm fired up about certain games and not about others.
And I think what's happened to me is I've become more about the game as opposed to the concept of the game.
All right. Okay.
So if you look at my first year's pick,
Yeah.
which I still think is a wonderful game, and I still think everything I say about it is still absolutely relevant, which is The Grizzled.
Yeah.
When I'm approaching games to consider for something like this year, it's actually, I sort of bypass that sort of thematic delivery and go straight into how does the game make me feel? What is the experience I get in relation to the game as a game as opposed to a narrative device? And that's how my appraisals have changed, I think.
That's interesting because just last night I happened to play Spirit Island.
Yeah.
Which, again, spoiler, is not on my list for any games. Not
I don't think it's bad. I think it's just unwieldy.
Yeah, maybe. But I realized as I was playing it, one of the reasons why why I was really enjoying my time with it had to do with the thematic, with the conceptual idea behind it, the idea of flipping the colonialism theme on its head. And I loved that. And others have pointed it out, and I'm just repeating the well-observed argument. The description of the spirits you play is really clever. They don't resort to some sort of fake make-up primitive language.
Right.
Instead, they take these phrases, they take these descriptions of these spirits that you play, and it's really evocative and it's really interesting. And because it's different, it feels fresh, exciting, and engaging to play. Yeah, but I think I think this game sort of reminded me that I do still occasionally appreciate the concept of a game, and I am willing to cut a game some slack if the concept is interesting, innovative, engaging, or just, out of the ordinary.
And the thing is,
but it doesn't win me over anymore.
Right. And the thing is, I've really realized that I still do approach games for concept, especially sort of like little Japanese games and stuff.
Right, yeah.
But I've been burnt a few too many times by a great conceptual idea with nothing to back it up.
Okay.
Style, substance, concept, and no mechanics underneath it, which is why my picks for this year, I think, are mechanically very rigorous games they're very much games and not ideas given to us through game form.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Right, Georgios, shall we move on to the ceremony?
You should re-look into your speech impediment at some point.
Professional voiceover artist. Well, it's been a real coup this year, Georgios.
Yes.
We've managed to get a lot of celebrity sponsors for each award.
We did indeed. I think you're going out, apologizing to them for the mean things we said on them about them on Twitter, and then offering them a chance to have their names be recognized by the gaming community. Really, really sold them on that.
But
idea.
wouldn't you jump at the chance to sponsor an award for 9 penneth and a scratch on the old bacco?
Possibly.
It's unfortunate that you made me go around and scratch these celebrities' backs.
That is true, but you still have long fingernails. I cut them.
I don't anymore, Georgios. They've worn down. So let's go to our first award, chosen by me and sponsored by...
The sponsor is the inimitable. See,
It's a great word.
Yeah, you sort of...
I'm rubbing off on you. Literally.
That's awful. Anyway, the first award sponsored by Bill Withers himself for the game of most incompetent onanism.
So this is the Bill Withers Award for Incompetent Onanism. And this year, it goes to Cousins War, chosen by me.
Not your cousins?
Not my cousins, no, I don't speak to them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm running away from my family as quickly as possible, Georgios. Yeah, so the reason I've chosen this game is that I don't play two-player games much.
I started.
And because I just don't have the option, I usually have groups higher than 2. And so I rarely consider them. But when I was given this at Essen by Tony to review, I played it when I got back from Essen because I didn't play any games. And I played this and I adored it. I played it 3 times just straight through. So much so that I said to Georgios, we should review this game. I think it's really... I think it's really interesting. I think it's really does what a two-player game should do. There's lots of back and forth. There is the opportunity to improve because you learn what the cards are. Then you're able to anticipate what the other player's going to do. I know you disagreed with me on the way the game flows, but I found the game flow really enjoyable too.
Oh yeah, no. For those interested, we reviewed the game in episode 55, The Circle of Life and Death, and we had different opinions. I don't think my opinion has changed much. I don't think it's a bad game. I think there were a few issues I've had, but none of them, fundamental. I can see why people like it. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, no, I was enthralled by this. As I said, there's been no game this year that I've really fallen in love with, but this might come closest, and my third pick, which I think will be something that will remain in my rotation for many years to come. This was the game this year that made me realize that I need to carve out more time in my life for two-player games.
As it happens, I lucked into the option of playing a few two-player games the last couple of weeks. And those who follow me on social media might know which one that is. It's a game I wouldn't say fallen in love with because the theme still gives me issues, but I kind of love shooting Nazis. So it's a game where I get to shoot Nazis, so that's great. Two-player game. I'm not going to say it just because I like feeling dickish. And it's really, really good. I still have issues with the theme, like I said, but goddamn, it's good. And I agree with you. There are a lot of two-player games that probably need to be looked into because apparently they are not bad.
Yeah, so I would recommend check out Cousins War. I wouldn't necessarily say buy it, play it. It is compact. It's interesting. It doesn't stay around too long, and it has a really nice back and forth between the two players, which I think two-player games should. Right, so now we're going to throw over to our poondog, middle-of-nowhere America correspondent with the cheesy voice, Thomas Cap Petty, the 123.
Hi everybody and happy holidays. This is TC Petty III, your favorite perfect information podcast personality, saying happy holidays and getting in on this end of year gala. I'm so excited to be talking about awesome games that I've played throughout the entire year of 2017, the best year I've ever experienced in my life. That's right, fake enthusiasm and radio voice, because that's all you're gonna get from me this year, because this year blows, and it fucking sucks. So get ready for some cutesy, cringe-worthy Game Award titles with a dash of my signature sarcasm and wit. So let's do my first one, and that is the ever-popular Reiner Knizia Award for Most Blatant Pasted-On Theme.
Most blatant pasted-on theme.
Oh, this one's easy. So that's Riverboats by Michael Kiesling. And Kiesling, if you don't know, he's usually part of the Kiesling-Kramer, Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer duo, but apparently they must have had a falling out or something. I don't know what the drama is. I want to know what the drama is. Anyway, so the reason why Riverboats is my pick as Pasted On Theme of the Year is because Riverboats is a game about farming. Yeah. You farm. During the game, you farm like different things like pumpkin patches, right? And you have to put workers on those different patches, and it expands those patches. And then you place tiles on top of them of different types of plants. And, it's like pumpkins or rutabagas or radishes and whatever. And then you ship those goods. Also, there's riverboats. Yes! I love it. It's one of my favorite things because it literally, there's a guy that's walking along the dock, and during the course of the game, you grab these riverboats. And right now, riverboats, as an addendum, I had to look this up on Wikipedia, but riverboats actually were this thing. You could, during a specific, very, very specific time period, you could ship goods on riverboats that were like these types of goods. But no one, if anyone asked you, does a riverboat ship goods? You'd be like, and if you asked, is the fun part about riverboats that they ship goods that you have farmed? You would be like, yeah. And so at the end of the game, it's not even people, you just put cubes, and they're not people, they're not anything that you put on these riverboats, and when they get to New Orleans at the end, they score you points. It's just My brain explodes when I think about this game, but it's delightful. I really enjoyed playing. I like playing the game, but man, is it themeless, and that is such a stretch, and I love it. So there you go.
All right, Georgios, so what's your first award on the docket?
Well, the first award has been a joint sponsorship. These two women came together and actually talked to me and were looking for a way to sponsor one of our awards, and I agreed, and I picked the one that I thought was most appropriate.
I've been surprised at the celebrity demand, actually, George.
Yes. I think I mostly just sent them pictures of famous male actors that were not me and tricked them into believing I was their agent.
You do look a little bit like Guardians of the Galaxy bloke, though, don't you?
What?
Tom
raccoon?
Pratt, or whatever his name is.
The raccoon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his name? Bobby Bito.
Yeah, Bobby Bito is the name of the raccoon. That is, again,
I love those Marvel movies, Georgios.
You do indeed. You can't stop, praising them every time we bring them up. We have the Jessica Williams and Michelle Williams Awards for hilarity.
Because Michelle Williams, especially in Manchester by the Sea, Georgios,
yes,
is renowned for her comedy turns.
Definitely. One of the funniest women on screen I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And there were quite a few games that were up for this award. There were games we played in Essen that just, at least to me, made me burst out laughing. Mountains of Madness, hilarious game, I think. There were games that were just chuckle-worthy because of the things that happen, sudden twists and turns. But the award finally, I think is worth awarding this year. And I'm not even entirely sure it's a 2017 release, but it's still surprisingly one of the funniest games that have hit my table this year, is Cookie Box, a written review of which can be found on the website. It is a very, very simple, very, very silly game where you try to sort of arrange tokens with the right sides up in the right order before any of your opponents.
And so is it a game though?
Yes.
Is it a kid's game?
I've tried playing it with kids. It wasn't as funny and it didn't work as well.
Because I read your review, but I haven't played the game.
Right.
Why hilarity? Explain why this game is so funny.
I think it is this discrepancy between a very, very simple action that sounds really, really simple, that shouldn't be so challenging as it is. But then you sit down and you have these double-sided tokens, with different, signs on each side. So you flip one over and then you're missing the other one and stuff like that. And just repeatedly and constantly failing to complete this simple challenge just has continuously led to righteous laughter at the table when we played it, because there's something joyful and funny and hilarious about, like, as I said in review, grown men trying to arrange cookies, according to a card and failing. I think it's the fact that you're failing. You're so used to playing these in-depth, complex strategic games. I take this action, so 3 turns from now I can do that action, and this will give me it's giving me a multiplier of 4, which I can then you have these complex plans, and you're like playing Concordia. I love playing Concordia,
right.
But that's very much about planning ahead.
Is this a postmodern ironic thing? That you're going, this is the Showgirls of board games. It's so bad, it's good.
No, not at all. There's absolutely nothing ironic about our enjoyment of this game. This is just pure love. This is just pure playfulness. The enjoyment of trying and failing and making mistakes that seem so obvious. It's just, I don't know why it works with this game. It doesn't work with other games. Why failure in other games leads to frustration and it doesn't here. But I think part of it has to do that we share this frustration, that we all feel a little bit stupid for not winning as quickly as we expect to win.
Yeah, well, I think if you have a discrepancy where it looks like it should be really easy and then it ends up not being as easy as you think is one thing.
Yeah.
I think if you share the humiliation around everybody sort of fairly equally, then that's not a problem. The thing is with a lot of Eurogames, and they're the games I love, but I do recognize this, that if you have a situation where you have 3 experienced players and 1 non-experienced player, humiliation is not shared around equally. And I don't care who you are. If everyone else is doing brilliantly and understanding the machinery of it, and you're 100 points behind, it makes you feel like a dolt, and you're not going to enjoy that, right?
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. I think this is part of it. I think there's the colorful production. There's the cuteness of the art. I mean, it's called Cookie Box. It's about cookies, and there's There's a mint-covered cookies, and there's, I think chocolate-covered cookies, and there's waffles. And it's almost, but not quite too cute to be ironic. It's not quite ironic yet. I can see, why you would get that impression.
Well, I just worry. It's a tendency that I've hated for the last 20 years.
Right.
I never understand the ironic love of things.
Right.
Oh, this is my favourite band. Why? Because they're shit. I don't understand that. Like things that are good, don't like things that are bad, because somehow you seem to have some rarefied, ironic attitude that is so much better than everyone else's, right? I hate that tendency. All right, so let's go over to our
Other American correspondent.
He's the man. I was going to say the man with a plan then, George. I don't even know if he has plans.
No, but he has a degree.
He does. He has a PhD, no less.
That's 3 letters he can put at the end of his name.
The Doctor of Love.
No.
The Doctor of Buttholes.
No.
Endocrinologist.
Nope. Go on.
Balls.
Almost. It's the board game professor.
Nicholas R. Mariner.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the end of the year wrap up. I'm so excited. This is our 3rd end of the year show. We've been doing this thing a long time. It feels pretty impressive. I'm happy to still be involved. My first category of voting for my part of our gala event, which will become, I'm sure, an annual and highly anticipated by all of the beloved board game community moment in this hobby. My first category is called the Eye of the Beholder Award for the most visually arresting game of the year. And there were a lot of very pretty games this year, so I wanted to throw my head in the ring for this particular category. I'm going to give a couple of runners-up really quick. I really like the art in Ex Libris. The art on the cards is fun. The sort of it's funny that it's an Adam McIver design game, but it's not actually an Adam McIver drawn game. But what I love about the art in Ex Libris is when you get your tableau of your bookshelves out on the board, it's just pretty to look at. The colors really pop on the table, and it's also just a lot of fun to read the titles, and it's got a lot of sight gag kind of humor. Loved Ex Libris. That's one I would name. Another one I would name as a runner-up is Pulsar 2849. Fantastic dice selection game. And it's got this just absolutely gorgeous sort of future noir space art, almost looks like concept art for Blade Runner or something like that. The only reason it might not be the winner of this category for me actually is because none of that art is seen throughout the game. It's like in the instruction book, or it's on the player mats if you're in the background if you're doing the individual tech trees. But you don't actually see it enough on the board. But there's some art within that game, the graphic design within that game that you can look through the rulebook, and it's absolutely stunning to look at. Okay, my award this year for the most visually stunning game, the most visually arresting game to look at is Azul. Azul is a tile-laying game, a tile drafting game. You're picking these little mahjong-sized plastic tiles, and you're trying to build your own mosaic in the sort of Muslim culture of patterns and symmetry, because they don't use people in art because it's forbidden, so as to avoid the creation of false idols. So a lot of Muslim art has these really elaborate patterns and symmetry, and the game when you get too deep into a game of Azul, it is so comfortable and rewarding to behold in front of you as you're building your little mosaic on the board, and you're putting the little tiles together. And there is a tactility of the shape and chunkiness of the tiles themselves, but it is an absolutely gorgeous game. I think it's if what you like in a game is pretty art and have it be visually appealing, I highly recommend you go with it. It happens to also be a fantastic game in general, probably a top 10 game for me for the year, just as an overall game, but as an artistic expression and as an exercise in aesthetics, it is the game on the market this year that you absolutely want to try out. So, the Eye of the Beholder award for most visually arresting game this year, I am awarding to Azul.
Hi, I'm Nicole. Welcome to Point Salad, where I take a game-related topic and my thoughts about it, mix it up real good, and serve it out fresh to you. I thought the timing of this topic would be a good one, so thanks to my friend Chris Rowlands from NPC Cast for the suggestion. He asked if I owned 0 games, which 5 would be on my holiday wish list and why. This has sort of been fresh on my mind throughout the year, as I've been building up my own collection after a split from my former partner. So in thinking about this sort of thing, I have to consider, what are the key games that I really love? My all-time favorites, the ones that I keep going back to. What are the cornerstones of a collection that is friendly for friends that I'd love to introduce to gaming? Does it matter if I look at my shelves and think, wow, this is like a really odd mix of stuff that's missing what some people would see as must-have titles? Do I want new? Do I want classic? Do I want a mix of stuff? So there's a lot to consider. 5 titles might seem like a lot to somebody with no games at all. Just going in and finding 5 games on a shelf and grabbing them might seem like a big splurge. To someone like me, it seems a little bit limiting, thinking about how I could pare down to just those essential games. It might be tough for you, dear listener, to think about this. Given the sheer catalog of board games that are available to us all right now in 2017, it's a tough choice. And I have a fairly broad range of tastes, but I'm sure some of these will have caveats due to number of players and the like, so it's not like these are my 5 favorite games ever, but I think these are 5 great starter games if you're going to make a holiday wish list. So let's dive in. My first choice is Carcassonne. This was one of the first hobby games I ever played, and I love it to this day. Either just played vanilla or with expansions. The simplicity of do one thing on your turn is wonderful. You lay down a tile, choose to put a meeple on it or not. The tile laying is really satisfying gameplay, and over multiple plays, learning to maximize the use of your meeples for points is something that players can learn. It's a fabulous game with 2 players, which makes it nice and flexible if you're looking for something to play with a partner or a small group at game night. My second choice is Jaipur. So I felt like I needed to recommend a specifically 2-player game, even though Carcassonne plays so nicely at 2. Jaipur is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's absolutely my favorite 2-player game. The simple gameplay, the gorgeous art, oh, so nice. And the tricky set collecting and trading decisions make it a really tidy little package of a game. And it's a nice small box too. I don't think I've ever taught it to somebody and have played less than 2 games in a row because it has been so well received. And I'm going to cheat with a second 2-player recommendation here. It's just a quick one. I've also always been really impressed with Lord of the Rings Confrontation. If you're into more sort of secret movement, mind game, kind of definite, kind of one versus each other sort of game. My third pick is No Thanks. This game is magical. I have never had it fall flat, no matter who I've taught it to. Newbies to gaming, work friends, seasoned gamers. There's just something that grabs you about the way this game plays. Like the slowly escalating competition, trying to milk points out of each other, because people really, really don't want that card. No, thank you. But the simplicity of play and components just makes it so accessible. There's a depth of experience to it, though, which means I will always come back to it as somebody who's played it a lot, and I've gifted it to friends on more than one occasion. It's something I will never hesitate to suggest. My fourth suggestion is Word Slam, the Venn diagram intersection of party game and word game, as I like to think of it. And it's the freshest pick on my list of 5. There are so many party and social deduction games out there right now. Honorable mentions, because I'm not very good at sticking to list parameters, as is previously apparent. Codenames and One Night Ultimate Werewolf, both favorites of mine. But Word Slam has been making waves for really good reasons. It's kind of like charades, but you have random words that your team members will need to guess. And you're the clue giver, frantically searching through these decks of cards that are just like nouns, verbs, adjectives, and the like. And you're trying to pick out a combination of words that will give a clue that will hopefully make sense and get people to guess the clue correctly. It's a delight. It is super easy to pick up, teach, and play. It's really been fun to play at conventions, but I also feel like it has been just as much of a hit at smaller game nights for me. So I'm glad it's in my collection. Now I have to wonder if concept will teeter on the edge and get pushed out, perhaps. My last suggestion is Sushi Go. I went back and forth with wondering if a deck building or a card drafting game would be the better choice for this last slot, but I figured I couldn't really go wrong with Sushi Go. Either the basic original or the variety-filled party release of this game is ideal, as well as being quick to teach and learn and quick to play. It's got a really good player number range as well. I think it goes from 2 to 6, possibly more with the party pack, if I recall correctly. The quick drafting set collection over just 3 short rounds is the right amount of kind of thinking to fun ratio. And I can't help bringing it to the table just because it is so cute. The illustrations are really fantastic. And it gives it just like, there's a little bit of flavor. So it's a cheap and terrific starting point to introduce yourself or other folks to the drafting mechanic and maybe go from there. So as a fairly omnivorous gamer, these have been my picks for a starter collection. I would love to hear yours. And also, if you have a suggestion for a point salad topic, please reach out to me at iHeartMuseums on Twitter or BGG. Thanks!
So we go on to our next award, Georgios, which is...
This is the Angus MacGyver Award for Ingenuity.
So is this games that are innovative?
No, it's games that are clever out the wazoo or any other bodily orifice. It's games... I mean, you probably have noticed this, and I've noticed this as well. Gamers love games that are clever.
Yeah.
That are smart. That go like, ooh, somebody thought of this. This is really smart. They love feeling that way themselves, and they love seeing this kind of effort and care put into the games.
One aspect I really love about gaming, and always have done right from the time I got into it, is that aspect of, I'd have never thought of this. Not in a million years. And I see it. There's one game, it's the Inland Port, Le Havre, the Inland Port. Mm-hmm. And there's this very simple mechanism for dealing with resources. And he's just mathed it out that you can just move it down one space and it emulates your consumption perfectly. Right. There's the wheels in Glass Road where when you automatically produce glass and brick, which is just completely ingenious. And the first time I saw it, I went, my God. And I love ingenuity in games. It really fires my cannon.
Yeah, and I think there were quite a few games this year that impressed on that level. I think one that has to be mentioned is Mini Rails by More Idea Games, by
Mark Gerritz.
Mark Gerritz, yes. I almost said McGurts, but that's another designer.
It is another designer.
It's a very, very clever game. I think the smartest part of it is definitely the taxation mechanism, which adjusts the likelihood of certain tokens actually putting out points, scoring points for you or not. And it's tied into the availability of these tokens and the value. This complex web of interaction between the elements in the game makes it really, really clever. I think I have to mention another game, Startups by Oink Games. Another game that's really, really smart about how it plays with probabilities, with how it plays with having to take risks or putting out cards because you can't keep them in your head, but hoping that somebody else won't pick them up again. How it's really very much about taking your chances on which cards you're going to draw, which cards are going to appear, and hoping that you will push ahead to get a majority at the end of the game scoring.
And I'm going to throw one in here quickly, if you don't mind.
Go on.
One that Nicholas R. Mariner is not going to agree with me on because he's
Our Mariner
is Fortress by Freedom and Freezer, one of the fast forward games. I played this at the inestimable Tony Boydell's 50th birthday party.
Right.
And the way he reveals not only complication, but just wonderfully exciting new actions to you. And the way it comes out of cards that are hidden in the deck has that wonderful moment where you draw a card. You know, no one else knows it because it's the only card that does that in the deck, and you go, ooh, I can't wait to play that because everyone's going to go, what, you can do that now? It was really, really rewarding, I felt.
Kind of like the Flare cards in Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah, something like a complete surprise.
Yeah, the surprises are great. Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
So who won the award then, Georgie?
The award, of course, that goes with a sizable prize award. Is it a prize award?
Yeah, they get
prize money. That's what the word.
Prize money.
Yeah,
except it's in flagugos, which is a currency we've just invented.
You've just invented. I'm paying them hard-earned cash. They're getting 4 cents if they come to my house.
If you come to George's house, you'll get 4 euro cents.
And this goes out, of course. We haven't actually announced the actual winner. The actual winner of the Angus MacGyver Award for Ingenuity goes to Rob Devio and Mountains of Madness.
I'm happy you chose this, Georgios.
You are?
Yeah.
I did not expect you to be happy with that.
Because I was surprised by this game.
It is very surprising.
So give us the reasons why, not only that you like it, because that's clear, but why it wins an award for ingenuity.
There are many reasons to award Mountains of Madness. I think, let's start with these offshoots, the not obvious ones. One of them, I think, it's going to sound horrible, but it seems to me I think I've played Pandemic Legacy, and I think I've played Betrayal at House on the Hill. But of the games Rob Devio has been involved in, especially Seafall has really taken a hit at his reputation as a solid game designer. And I think this game, in my eyes, redeems him completely, and I will defend Rob Devio as a great game designer, as somebody who puts effort and care in the games he produces. He doesn't do things half-assed. Sometimes they might misfire. They seem to have misfired.
Every game designer designs a turkey at times, though.
But I think this shows that this is a man who understands the psychology of gamers, and this is probably one of the most important elements you can have as a game designer, understanding why people think when you play the game.
I'm going to give you a word, Georgios, and I want you to refute it.
Go on.
Gimmick.
Yes, I refute this.
because just briefly, you get these madnesses that make you do silly things.
Exactly.
Okay? And a lot of, now I'm gonna later I'll sort of talk about my opinion on this game briefly, but before going into this game, it just screamed a big neon sign saying gimmick, gimmick, gimmick.
Yeah.
Why isn't it?
I think it's actually, I would expand the word gimmick to party game, because I think this is the game that name is often, it's often used in context with this game. And I want to say you're wrong. You're completely wrong. If you think this is a party game, you're utterly wrong. I think people have misapplied this word for this game. They've misinterpreted the humor of this game as being a party game, whereas a party game is all about getting you engaged with not engaged too, but engaged with, interacting with other people, getting you to talk, getting you to sort of pay attention to other players. This is a proper co-op game. This puts an actual challenge in front of you, a communicative challenge, a coordination challenge. You have 30 seconds to pull it off. And the madness cards, the complications that are forced upon you that you cannot talk about, sort of give you something to struggle against, in addition to just, getting the right cards and combinations. You're right. At first, some of them are silly. They're explicitly silly. And I think this is truly, I don't know if it's accidental or if it's utterly brilliant, but I believe one of the effects that these humorous madness cards may have is that the challenge of the game registers as not trivial, but not so serious. And that may be why people think it's a party game, because what it does by sort of introducing these weird changes of behavior in other players, you have absolutely no ground to argue for an alpha gamer. You can't tell people what the best option is, because they just look at you and go, this is just a game, relax. And I think this is utterly brilliant. The idea of putting a challenge in front of people, but the way you present that challenge, the way that the challenge sort of influences your behavior, completely robs you of the legitimacy of calling the shots, of telling people what to do, because nobody's going to take you seriously in a game that's explicitly about, that knowingly makes you do things that make people laugh.
What surprised me, because I watched a couple of reviews about it, and obviously I have my opinions on Seafall, and so I was a little bit suspicious of Rob Daviau going into playing this game. And I saw reviews, and it looked to me like a very flimsy game, which silly things had been bolted onto.
Right.
It looked the absolute quintessence of laziness and gimmickry. Then I played it, and where I agree with absolutely everything you said, what really struck out to me is it's an actual game.
Right.
You can actually play it. There are actual strategies, actual tactics. You can approach this as not just a silly thing to do for 30 minutes. It is rewarding, interesting, but also at the same time, consciously, uproariously funny.
Yeah.
And not in a zany way, but in an emergent way, in the way it generates interactions between players. And that is utterly refreshing, very surprising. And I'm full of admiration for this game.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it was my biggest surprise of Spiel 2017. And like I said earlier, it might not last forever. This might not be, a great classic, but right now this is an amazing game, one I love bringing to the table. And I do want to sort of mention, there's one criticism I've heard that I don't think I'm willing to, I wouldn't be able to refute completely, the sense that the game failed to capture the kind of claustrophobic, scary, and dreadful atmosphere of the original Lovecraftian story. And that might be true. I don't
It's
think
an adventure game. It's not a horror game.
Exactly.
So that's fine. I think it feels like an adventure. It's more in keeping with Indiana Jones than it is with H.P. Lovecraft.
Maybe, yeah.
And that's fine with me. It sets out to do that. Its graphic design, its art sets out to do that, and it works.
And there's I just remember one small thing I want to mention without spoiling it. There are a lot of little details strewn throughout the game, the way that's set up, the way the challenges work, the individual challenges, the tokens work, that are very meticulously placed that way to adjust the difficulty, to allow for a increased difficulty, that to sort of not force, but gently nudge an arc to emerge as you play. Things get more challenging, things get more riskier, and then there's some surprises. It's amazing.
You're forced to meander, which is really clever. I like that, because you want to take the most direct route. You want to get there as quickly as possible. Just mechanically, in terms of numbers, it doesn't allow you to do that.
Right.
You have to meander. And that becomes frustrating in a good way, in the sense that, God, do we have to go here now? I don't want to go here. We need to get to the next level, but we need to go horizontally, because otherwise we won't get the resources to go up to the next level and we'll inevitably fail.
Yeah.
All of that is great decision-making and great fun.
I agree. I think this fully deserves the Angus MacGyver Award for ingenuity to Rob Daviau, who, if he shows up at my place, will get full cents from me.
So, my next award, Georgios, the Cilla Black Award for the Unexpected. Now, this is not something like Mountains of Madness.
Right.
What I mean by the unexpected here is something that I had absolutely no aspirations to like. And then played it and thought, wow, that's actually completely out of my wheelhouse. And this was really great. And this goes to Dragon Castle from Horrible Games.
All right. Oh, yeah, okay.
Reason being, I don't do abstracts. I've tried a lot of the cool abstracts that are out at the moment, and there's been a renaissance of abstracts, and I think that's a good thing.
Which ones are those?
So like Santorini, for example.
All right, okay.
So Santorini really got the buzz a while ago. And I played it, and it did nothing for me. I just thought, fine. Back to those days when I had a choice of playing with Star Wars toys or playing chess. And I'd always go to the Star Wars toys because it's just much more fun than bloody chess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So and in my gaming life, since I've rediscovered games, I've never gone for abstracts. I've always gone for games that at least have the pretension to theme, even if they don't have it very strongly integrated. And Dragon's Castle is this perfect package. And now I don't like to talk about components, but you can't avoid it with this game. They have these Bakelite mahjong tiles that are just glorious to feel and manipulate. But also the game is grokkable instantly, but very, very deep, which I think, I think that abstract games should be, right? They should be easily accessible. They should be rules light, but very, very deep. And Go, I assume, is the sort of archetype of that. You can explain Go in 5 minutes, but you'll never master that game, right? And Dragon Castle...
I don't get Go.
Nor do I. But Dragon's Castle really leads to hitting that part of my brain that fires when I'm trying to solve connections between things.
All right.
And it's really satisfying. And if any game this year has got me into the flow state where time has just become immaterial and I'm engrossed in what I'm doing, it's Dragon's Castle.
So was the surprise, the unexpectedness, the fact that it is so deep, that it is so that playing the game itself is what's the word, immersive?
It's that I engaged with it at all.
All right, okay.
Because up until this point, I've just not engaged with any of these kinds of games.
Why do you think that is? What about this game made you sucked you in?
It's partly that it's so tactile and wonderful to manipulate. That's one thing.
Right.
But you could say the same about Santorini, and Santorini didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, it's one of those things. A lot of my favorite games are about that unquantifiable thing that I got it very quickly.
Okay.
So the board was laid out, and there's sort of wonderful ancillary things. There are so many different layouts you can do that challenge you in different ways that make the game easier to play or more constrained to play.
Okay.
And there's a great back and forth. I played it 2-player, which I think is mostly the consensus is the best way to play it. And there's a great back and forth, but it's less in the way that Cousins War was quite antagonistic and chaotic. This is much more passive aggressive. This is just taking
This sounds like a game for me.
This is just taking the piece the person may want.
Right.
But there was just something about this game that it's so understandable. The minute the game is laid out, you think, I know what's viable here.
Right.
And that's so important to me as a gamer.
Yeah.
This is why, and we come back and, you know, I don't want to harp on this game, but I haven't spoken to you before. This is why something like Dice City put me off. Because when the game was laid out, I didn't know what was viable.
Oh, okay.
I could do things and I knew how to play it mechanically, but I didn't have that instinct about this will be good. Whereas with Dragon's Castle, instantly I thought, I kind of know what to do here.
Okay,
there's plenty of room for improvement, but that's viable, that's not. And that's very important to me as a game.
I can see that, yeah. That reminds me, there was another game that sort of fits the description you've given that I've played that I want to mention here in this context, which was Hand of the King, the Game of Thrones card game, I think by Bruno Cathala.
Okay.
Also an abstract game, essentially. I also played it only as a 2-player game, and it did something very similar to what you said, but though probably not to that extent. Otherwise, I would have probably mentioned it at some other point. It's clear, it's tactical, it works well, it plays quickly. The art style is nicely different, but it is a nice, thinky little puzzle. It plays about 15 to 20 minutes. So, while nowhere near Dragon Castle, as far as I can tell, I think it's worth, giving it a glance because it's small, small, tiny little package, up to 4 players. But I've played it with 2, and I was very pleasantly surprised by it after being by one of our listeners, who I know is listening to this right now, to our live show, obviously, this one, who did not like it at all, but sort of begrudgingly agreed to play it with me. I really quite liked it.
I think it's really surprising about my picks this year is that they're all fairly light games.
All right. Okay.
And I love crunchy, heavy, deep, long games. I love the giving over of an entire day to play a game.
Yeah, that's why you love Twilight Imperium so much.
That's why I love it so much. But this year, and is this a movement in the industry? I don't know, but this year...
Or is it a movement in your bowels?
Indeed. The real sort of games that I felt attracted to are the ones that are almost instantly accessible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And short. You look at Dragon's Castle, 30 minutes. You look at Cousin's War, quarter of an hour. And if you'd have spoken to me a year ago and told me that, I'd have gone, for sure. I like my games to be at least 2 hours long and super deep. But I don't think it's an evolution of me as a gamer, particularly because I still love those games. But it's just simply you cannot disregard what's standing right in front of your face. These games are great.
Yes, I agree.
Let's go to America.
Whee!
All right, here we go again. It's your old pal, Nick Mariner, back with my second category of the night for our big end of the year wrap-up. This category for me, I selected, goes by the title of the Run DMC Award for Old School Goodness in Board Games. I assume the spirit of the award, as I understood it, to be what kind of game evokes for me and for players this feeling of nostalgia or the old school vibe. And two in particular came to mind for me, and so I really jumped on this category because there's I wanted to talk about these two, one more than the other. My runner-up for this category is Rudiger Dorn's Montana. I mentioned this when I was doing my BGG wrap-up. I was incredibly impressed with Montana. It is a fun game. It's a quick game. It does not take a lot of time to play, and one of the critiques I've heard of it is that it takes it's too short for how much setup that there is. It doesn't have enough table life, but I highly recommend if you want to play this game, play it more than once in a row with the same setup. But one of the reasons I was so impressed with this game was that it uses a spinner as a game mechanic. Like an old Snakes and Ladders kind of like flick spinner to see which color you put your left foot on in Twister. And the way it works is that whatever space you land on, you get a certain color of player and different colors of meeples that you can use for other actions on the board. And there is ways to mitigate in the game the spinner itself, so it's not completely random. But I was so thoroughly impressed with how much I loved the game that used such an antiquated technology like a spinner. It is so faux pas these days to have something like that in your game. And Rudiger, because he is a mad genius, managed to create a game in which there is one, and it's a fun as hell experience. But that's not the one I want to talk about. The one I want to talk about, and I'm so excited to talk about for all of the things that it did to me, to evoke and to latch on to 10-year-old me pulling games out of his grandmother's basement and just going through all these crazy things and not even playing them right, is Ethnos. Ethnos almost got included for the art category as well, and it's damn near almost getting included for the next category as well. It is, without a doubt, probably in my top 3 favorite games of the year in general. This would be a runner-up for Game of the Year, period. I have loved this game this year so very much. It's an area control game. It's very Ticket to Ride-like in its basic concept. Draw a card. At some point, you're going to play a string of cards. However, whatever card is on top activates a particular power of that race, so it's a little more complex than Ticket to Ride. And it's got this great push your luck element to it, where there's dragon cards. There's 3 dragon cards, and after the 3rd dragon card comes out, the round ends. So you're playing sort of fast and loose for a while, just drawing off the top of the deck. But as soon as that first dragon card hits, everybody really starts to hold their breath of, I don't think I have enough time left. So you start to make decisions on how much longer can I hope that a dragon card doesn't come out and end the round before I get to make my move. It's just an absolutely fantastic game. But why it's in this category is because of the art. The art in this game, and I didn't even bother to look up who the artist is, so I apologize in advance, catches for me this early 90s fantasy artistic expression that was in all of the games that I was playing at the time, all of the stuff that I sort of remember from that era of the pencil drawn, kind of dark but very elaborate landscapes. Like I said, my grandmother, we stayed with her while my parents worked all through the summer when we were in school, and she had all these crazy games in the basement that I think my uncle put there. But they all had this sort of vibe, this sort of fantasy art, old school. In this game, it calls back to that era of like early 90s Dungeons and Dragons and the early stages of Magic the Gathering, even like the art on those cards. And it did everything for me in that game to grab a hold of my sense of nostalgia, and I'll just stare at the cards while I play. Because the board itself isn't particularly appealing. That's probably why I didn't put it in the art category, because it's really just the art on the cards that's most impressive. But there is a sort of old school nostalgic vibe to the art production in that game that was so wonderful that it's the game I think I've played the most this year, Ethnos. I always bring it to game night. It doesn't get played as much as I'd like it to, but it's always in my pile because I have yet to turn down a game of it. I got to play it at BGG again with some of my game group and some listeners to this show. And so I love Ethnos. It's a top game of the year for me. But specifically, not only just from gameplay, but the way that it grabs hold of that great old school nostalgic vibe. I can't recommend it enough. So that is my Run DMC award for old school goodness in a board game.
And let us not forget this award, the best game that needs a second edition immediately.
Best game that needs a second edition.
So a little backstory on this. Martin Wallace is a famous game designer that's also known for self-publishing his games and not necessarily fully testing them when they come out, and they tend to go through distinct revisions going into the second or third editions, and I even think sometimes they like fourth editions, right? So my pick for this year is Clans of Caledonia. And, what's interesting about Clans of Caledonia is I say it needs a second edition almost immediately, but I really like this game. I think it's cool. I think most people will enjoy just the act of playing it, even though it has way more flaws than I would have expected from a Euro game of this weight, and people give it a lot of room, even though it has these weird things. So, for example, there's a market off to the side that goes up and down depending on what people buy and sell. All these pieces for really very little movement on this market board. So I don't know why that isn't. Why is that not affected more? I don't know. Also, you have this off to the side. You're supposed to keep track of these goods. During the game, people will complete contracts, and contracts will allow you to move certain spaces along this good track. And for each good that you do of this type of contract, which has literally nothing to do with the goods that you're selling, you might be selling like milk or cheese, and then all of a sudden tobacco goes up on this market 3 spaces. Why? I don't know. Who knows? But it does. And if you go past these little spots on the track, which are in every 5 points, you get $1. Everyone forgets to do this thing, and the only significance of it is that it's counterintuitive. At the very end, whichever good was sold on these contracts more scores only 3 points for each of those things on your contracts, and the second one is 4, and the one that was least sold is 5. So you literally have no control over it, and at the end of the game, it's just like 3, 4, or 5, whatever. Luckily, there's a variant in the game that says, just make them all 4. But then that takes the whole, why is there a track there? And the answer might be, oh, well, you have to score victory points during the course of the game. Literally, we scored I think during the last game we scored 18 points was the highest possible score that someone had on that track during the course of the game. That's 18 points. And you might be like, oh, okay, well, it's doing something. Everybody scored 130, 120 points at the end of the game. That track had no significance. I could have just had little tokens in front of me. It's not like it depended on anything. Oh, it's so weird. And then each of those individual contract cards, again, on the right side of it, like I told you, there's really no significance to why one thing is on one side or the other. Well, along the side, there is no iconography for this. It just says at the top, this is something that you get immediately from completing this contract. In the middle, this might be a little special bonus that you get, like victory points. And then on the bottom, here's another form of victory points, right? And it equals those like goods that I was talking about. That's not how many you move, that's how many you get at the end of the game. And oh, what? Jeez. So anyway, great game. Totally needs a second edition immediately to fix those issues.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
Ooh, Georgios.
Yes.
Sorry I'm late, but we got stuck in the buying shoes shop thing. I don't know, Georgios, I don't know. I've been being dragged around buying things. Some of them are white, and I don't know what's going on.
Well, that doesn't seem that different from every other day, though.
I don't get dragged around shops usually, Georgios. Usually, I just hang around outside them looking suspiciously at the people inside and occasionally grinning in a sinister manner.
That is true. I mean, thanks to you, I've known all manners of, what's the word? What's the legal term for, keeping people out of shops? Restraining orders, that's it.
Yeah, I have. Literally, I go to bed at night and I reminisce by reading my restraining orders from the past, Georgios. Back through to 1983, where as a child I followed an old woman into a shop and kicked her dog up the anus.
You had a very weird childhood.
I was a precocious child, Georgios.
You were an animal torturer.
All right, should we go inside anyway, then?
Yes,
because
we should.
It's cold and I want a test tube cocktail.
Okay. I mean, we've upped the prices a bit, but sure.
What do you mean we?
You don't remember? I'm sharing part of the bar.
Oh, you and the Bazookies now own it, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Georgios?
Yes, that is still my name.
What the bloody hell's that?
Well, that we sort of changed the arrangement. We now have lights from under the table as well as over the table.
No, Georgios.
No,
Georgios. There is a gigantic beard sitting in our table.
Yes, and you will... Oh, no, at a table? I thought you meant... no, that's Janine. That is a man with a beard. That is correct.
What? Did you just say Janine had a beard?
No, I called her your beard. I believe that's the...
What does that mean? Is that a Greek term for fiancé or something?
I just picked this up on the internet. I mean, I haven't actually learned this language. I was just watching...
Anyway, back to the point, Georgios.
Yes.
Back to the point, Georgios. There's someone sitting at our table. As the owner, I think you should rectify it.
All right, we can move to another table?
No, this is our bloody table. We've been there for 2 years, Georgios. Ever since
it's not quite 2 years. I mean, we were at the other
ever
pub.
since that snafu with the local trade organisation, we've been coming here, Georgios.
Yeah, how's that going, by the way?
Well, the trade organisation?
Yeah.
We don't have time for referring back to former episodes, Georgios. Get him out of our seat. Excuse me.
No, we can
Excuse me.
No, come on.
Excuse me. No, Beard, talk to me. Excuse me.
I think he's ignoring you on purpose. You're being very rude.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
What are you doing sitting here?
I'm sitting here. I think you summed it up. Here's where I'm sitting.
That is correct, yes. There you go. He is perfectly within his rights to sit here. He's bought a drink, even one of the expensive ones, so I see no reason to ask him to leave. But since the chairs are wide and open enough and there's this bench over here, I think we can all fit and, have a relaxing chat. And I order some drinks for myself.
All right, well, move over. Move over.
No need to be rude.
I'm sorry. I'm just not used to it. I'm discombobulated, Georgios. I've had a day on the high street, and now I come in, and someone sat in my chair. I'm very sorry, young man. Would you tell me your name?
Sure, it is Troy.
And would you buy me a large plethora of different alcohols?
Like Greek Troy?
One and the same.
Oh, excellent.
They weren't. It wasn't Greece, Georgios. It specifically wasn't Greece, was it, Troy? Greece were fighting Troy. It was Agamemnon, wasn't it?
But the whole point is basically we have somebody sitting here who's named after a place. We don't get those kind of people often here. I mean, we never had Lourdes, like Madonna's kid. We never had Brooklyn, I believe Posh's kid. I mean, I have no idea what the royals are going to call their kids. Probably. We haven't had
my friend Shitcake Avenue around either. That was his rapper name.
Madrid Jefferson has not been here.
Yeah, but then actually,
Who?
he's not allowed in anyway. It's
All right, then, Troy. So
him,
tell us about.
yeah.
You can let me speak, George.
No.
So, Troy, tell us about yourself. If we're going to get to know each other, if you're going to sit in my seat.
Well, I've traveled here from a far way away. I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I've traveled this far and looking for the perfect seat. And I found this seat, and this is where I choose to reside. I've left behind my wife, my 3 children, my 2 dogs in, again, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And here's where I will stay.
Is there one beach in Virginia?
Yes, ours.
Ah, amazing. Anyway, so I don't know if you're familiar with what we do here, but me and Georgios, we have people sort of answer things that we've done, and we talk about them. So that's part of the price you have to pay for sitting in our seats.
Yes, you have to talk.
I've also heard that someone's going to rectify something, so I'd rather answer the questions than be part of the rectifying, if that's possible. But I'm in for whatever.
Is that a sex term? Rectify. Sounds very sexy. All right, so let's go to the networker, who he's been newly christened.
I have a great idea. I have an even
Hover.
better idea. How about we introduce these new fancy listeners who are just listening right now what the guild question actually was?
Can you get it? Can you tell us what it is? Troy, could you tell us what it is, please?
Yes, we're talking about legacy games, and are legacy games good for the hobby? Are they, a fad? What do legacy games bring to the hobby that we love so much?
But beautifully and succinctly put. So, what did Gil Hover have to say? He gave us a handy list.
He did indeed. So that makes, we don't have to read everything he's written. Just, the 5 points that seem easily summed up. And I'm just going to run them down. Number 1, the market can support games with a defined, finite number of playthroughs. Number 2, a game with a single linear narrative can offer dramatic opportunities that modular, replayable games cannot match easily. Number 3, it's okay to destroy and modify game components as part of a campaign. Number 4, it's interesting to hide components and rules in your packaging and reveal them as a surprise to the player during given moments of your game campaign. And number 5, you can bundle disparate scenarios, advanced rules, and mini expansions into a single campaign by placing it into a narrative. I think some of them are kind of overlapping though.
So how right or wrong do you think he is, Troy? Mr. Hover.
I think I'm not sure, this is a topic that you can almost dive into every definition, what's legacy, what's a fad, and that's what I'm thinking about, what's a fad. I wouldn't say deck build. I don't think deck builders are a fad because you can see them. Maybe standalone deck builders are a fad, but deck building is a mechanism. Worker placement is a mechanism. I don't think you can certainly say is a fidget spinner.
What would you say is a fad, though? How would you define a fad?
I think it's something that it either goes away or the people that want it to go away, champion. I feel like fidget spinners have kind of gone away. As a parent of 3 kids, whoever came up with the concept of flipping a water bottle, I will find you and I will beat you to death with a wrench. It's just the worst. It is the worst thing ever. So I'm not sure if that's a fad, but I think going into it, a longer narrative lets you tell better stories. The longer movies let you tell a more. It could be a long movie that tells a terrible tale, but most of my favorite movies are 3-hour kind of long unwinding narratives, and only the legacy format I think lets you do that.
I think it's interesting because he talks about how deck building is a fad and worker placement was a fad and microgames. They're the 3 examples that he uses. But I think what's different about that than legacy is legacy isn't a mechanic, right, in the way that those things are. Well, okay, thank you, Mr. Pennant. But what is legacy if it's not a mechanic? Can you define what it is?
I think my first cut on it was it's something where, and I've read different opinions on the guild, to me it's something that your decisions from the previous game carry through in terms of rules, in terms of my character had a wood sword, now they have a metal sword. There's some sort of carryover from game to game.
How do you feel about the idea that I had of irreversibility? Is that a legacy concept, do you think? That once you change something, it's impossible to change it back?
I think so. I think that's kind of the definition of it. Like, if it's, you mean like the tearing of a card or the writing on a board? I mean, I think that's, yeah. I think that's it.
Actually,
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think the irreversibility, I could imagine being the first thing that might get adjusted as the legacy concept sort of carries through, so it lives on in other iterations and later games. Because as exciting and as thrilling as it is to destroy components, to write on your board, to sort of do all these kind of irreversible things, I could see this part of legacy games be the most fad-like, as in a fad in the sense of they are exciting because they're new and they're different, but once they're no longer different and they're no longer new, they lose their appeal. Where I think the carryover, the continuation, the consequences carrying from one, the consequence of your decisions carrying from one game to the next, I think that's appealing. And this is something that you can, I think, still put into a game without making it irreversible.
But what's the difference then between a legacy game and something like Descent or Imperial Assault? What's the difference?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how, if you can, I mean,
because I think we'd agree then, but I think we'd all agree they're not legacy games.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Descent or Imperial Assault are not legacy games. And what I'm saying is I think the defining characteristic is the legacy element, is the fact that once you go past a certain point, you can't go back. Otherwise, it's a narrative. It's a narrative game that builds on previous plays, which isn't a legacy game.
Yeah, to me, I've tried to pick the softest version of the concept of what you did before matters the next time. And to me, the softest version of Legacy is Fabled Fruit, So in theory, that's a game where you play, you save where you're at, and then you pick up where you left off, and what you did last time, you can keep going, your scores carry over and things like that. Again, I've made it halfway through that, and we completely reset it. So do you need to physically destroy something for it to be a legacy? I think to that definition, you do if your hard line is going to be the difference between legacy and campaign.
No, actually, I think
I think it's irreversible in the sense of so Fabled Fruit is interesting because it's kind of irreversible in the sense that you either have to play from where you are or go back to the beginning. So you're starting a new game cell as opposed to going back around or a level. I think that would feel deeply unsatisfying with Fabled Fruit. I think you need to start from the beginning and play it all the way through.
Yeah, I think there's a cognitive irreversibility of I will never, there's only one time where what the raspberry does. The raspberry does something, and once you find out what the raspberry does, you that's one moment in your life, and you'll never be able to go back to that moment when you remembered what the raspberry lets you do. I think, you're not tearing a card out, you're not writing something down, but that moment is a legacy element, cognitively to that game.
Like the ending of The Sixth Sense, when we finally discover that M. Night Shyamalan is an absolutely appalling director.
I think that actually happened in the later episodes, but yes, generally yes.
All right, so let's go on to Danny Perello, whose username is Relax. I think he's telling us something. What does Danny say? Troy?
He talks about the disposable nature of games, that he has a concern, be it just a fiduciary or a environmental and eco concern about the disposable nature of games, that when he is done with playing a game, what does he do with it? He's either expended his funds or he's expended the raw materials from Earth on this game, and that the disposable nature of these games, makes them unsatisfying.
So, Georges, what do you reckon? So he basically says it's wasteful, it's unsustainable. He uses the phrase, it hurts my soul, and it's deplorable. How do you feel about it?
That reminds me of something somebody else once said. I don't know. I think can't be important. I would remember
some godlike intelligent man mountain.
I don't think I've said anything of the sort. Anyway, I think again, this branches off of your idea of the irreversibility, the destructiveness of a legacy game being central to its identity. I think Denny's concerns are part of the reason why I think this irreversible changes, this destruction of cards, of components, is not going to carry on for too long, because there are people who do feel, we felt somewhat that way about the exit games, that you spend well, these cards are made, and most of them you just throw away. And in these types of legacy games that are built on destroying components, literally destroying the game you've bought, and you can never sort of relive the narrative again. You can't rewatch it the way you can rewatch a movie. So I think that I still do think that this is the criticism that will lead eventually to people adjusting the legacy formula to allow people to sort of not destroy their game during play.
Well, I think it's interesting because I had a big problem with the exit games, and I don't have a problem with legacy games. And I think it's interesting as to why. And I think it's a very simple equation. I think what you get from legacy games, you use all the bits, right? The big issue I had with the exit game was that you have this deck of cards that you probably don't use most of it, but after the game is over, it's useless. So you have just this absolutely futile component in the box that's a complete waste. And secondly, without wanting to be reductive and rudimentary, you get a lot out of a legacy game. You get a lot of hours, 15, 30 hours of play out of this.
Well, if you're stupid enough, you get the same amount out of an exit game, though.
Well, that's true. But, I mean, the point is with the exit games, they last 3 hours, right?
Well, and they do if we play them.
And, I mean, you're supposed to do it in an hour, of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, and you've got this whole deck of cards that you throw away. Whereas a legacy game, you have a lot of time. And I understand it still is a little... I can understand if you're squeamish, but I think there is an economy of scale at play here that I don't have an issue with.
I've played Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and I've made it through May, which is probably maybe 2 Mays ago. So I think that's one of the I guess, you know, to talk about my experiences and then, you know, add some opinions. I think one of the things that makes it challenging was, you know, we made it to May, and then I played with a friend. We named our diseases together. We named the people together. We made it through. And then he moved 6 hours away, and, you know, so my friend Jake is, you know, he's moved back to Charlotte, North Carolina. He's back there. So it's sat on my shelf for about 2 years with the promise of, we're going to get together, we're going to play this, and, you know, one day we'll play that, which is great. It's like a harbinger that, like, it's something we can plan on the future. It's something that we can plan on. If it's a bad game, like, you know, a good portion of my collection is something I get through BGG auctions or used games. If you buy a legacy game and you're 2 games in, you're like, this isn't for me, and I wish I would have written all those horrible things on the board, I can't, you know, sell this to anybody. Like, and this, you're just done.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, though. The idea that once you start sort of customizing the parts of your game, you can't really get rid of it. Because I find myself at this point getting rid of a lot of games that I either don't play or don't really need to own anymore. And that's something you can't do. Basically, the only ending a legacy game can have is, you know, trash bin.
Yeah, a game you go off has a utility, has a potential further life, right? Whereas, I mean, I've got my Pandemic 1 board up on the wall, so that's kind of assuaged my guilt to some degree, because I look at it now and I see the appalling things all of the rest of the people I played with wrote on the board, because I was very serious.
Yes.
They wrote terrible things.
That's pretty much how it works on the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone listens to the show, you know that I am an upstanding, clean-voiced, intelligent realm of serious adultness.
We spent 2 months trying to figure out if the disease Chinese freckles was racist or not. I thought freckles would be an interesting disease, and I just picked a country, and we landed on we thought it was fine, but it was a struggle. So I understand what you're saying.
It is fine. Basically, what you're doing is you're just importing cuteness around the world. Exactly. So we go on to renowned deck-building designer and all-round spelling out his name on his BGG profile with micro-badges, Pinny Schechter. What does Pinny say?
He basically says they bring RPG decisions into board games.
I think, to me, that was the first thing I thought of, so it's obviously what I'm agreeing with here, is that again, it goes back to the definition of legacy, is what you do in game 1 impacts what you do in game 2. And I'm saying this as someone who's watched RPG videos online, has never played one, but, you know, if you spend game 1 trying to open a door and you can't find the key to it, and you kill the monster there's a mysterious kind of weird gypsy and you kill her, you get the key, and the game ends. Well, the next game you have that key and you carry it through. I think even the fundamental concept of naming your characters in Pandemic Legacy is an RPG concept. Like, name your character, give them attributes. Now you care about them more because you've given them a name. You've made them stronger, smarter, or they're a better healer, and so you immediately have maybe more of a connection to them.
So is there a difference? Hang on. As a resident RPG expert, George, is there a difference between... Because it seems to me here he's conflating narrative and RPG. Where do they diverge? How are they different?
I think one's a medium and one's a form of content. As in, a narrative is the way we sort of package content, and an RPG is a medium through which we create and or consume said content. I think I think what Troy said is very interesting. I think that's the reading that I agree with. The long-term consequences, something that carries over, but with the addition that in a campaign game like Descent, they don't carry over. The game doesn't change because of your decisions. Your characters may change, they may grow, they may become stronger or die and be replaced, but the game itself doesn't change. You're still playing by the same rules. You're still using, if anything, scenario-based adjustments to the rules. But in a legacy game, the game changes as you play it. You do something, you make a decision, and because of that decision, the game offers you different options from now on. And
you see, I wonder. I've been thinking about this because you were talking about it on the show, and I wonder whether it's the illusion of change. I wonder whether it's that thing. I saw this guy talking about designing narrative computer games, and he showed this decision tree that you make this decision, you go down this path, and you go down this. You make this decision, you go down this path. And actually, the tree had very few branches. And in fact, what happened was always pretty much going to be the same thing. And what it gave you was an illusion of change, an illusion of agency. But in fact, you're being railroaded down a very strict narrative path. And I think playing Pandemic Legacy, for instance, I think that's what it does. It gives you the illusion of choice and agency and change without actually delivering the real thing.
I'm not sure I agree, though. I think what the game offers, what the game says you can do is adjust your options. I think one of the only sleight of hand that you have in Pandemic Season 1, and I think Pandemic Season 2 as far as I can tell, is that you never exactly know what's at stake. You don't know what the consequences are going to be of your decisions. You're just guessing. Everything sort of plays out in your head. The idea of, all right, if I put this sticker down on this town, on this city, it will give me the following options, I'm sure, or I hope it will give me the following chances next turn or next game, but you don't know for certain. I think this is the part that leads to this great investment into the game and creates this desire to see what happens next, because you don't know how your choices are going to play out. In that sense, this is true pretty much of all narrative media. I
think it would be really interesting to play through Pandemic again, to see to what degree your decisions affect the difficulty of the game, the outcome of the game. Because we're all clear, because you get that deck of cards, the story is always going to be the same. You can't avoid the actual physical story being the same. But I agree with you. It's interesting that maybe your decisions affect how you arrive at a destination. And, it's the journey, not the destination at the end of the day, I guess. I
think that's closer to what makes narrative stand out in a game, in a legacy game. The idea that it's uncharted territory for you. And this is, it's part of, opening new packages, but also, what will happen next, because you can never quite tell what the changes are going to be next turn, next month, or 2 months from now. I think it's part of Season 1, and I'm sure it's going to be part of Season 2 as well.
How did you feel... Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, how did you feel about that, Troy? Do you feel like you have control over where the game goes when you play Pandemic?
Well, I think, in terms of what makes a hard decision, is it, a decision that you're going to make that, you make a hard decision in the concept of you're going to make a decision that's going to determine where you ultimately go. I feel like legacy games maybe do that a little bit mechanically weak. Maybe something like Near and Far will say you can fight a cat, or you can go scrummage in a pile of leaves. Like, it should be a hard decision because it's going to determine the next 4 hours of playing this game, but there's really not a lot of information. So is it harder to make an easy decision that's going to go in a certain direction, or, play something like, like Kalis or Food Chain Magnate, where I put my restaurant in the wrong spot and I hired the wrong person, and the next 3 hours are going to be fucking torture because I went off the rails right away. It's still a hard decision, but it's a mechanically hard decision because the game rewards that hard decision versus I didn't necessarily think about it too much. To me, I feel like from that standpoint, there's maybe a little bit of legacy in every game where you make that decision and you carry it through. You decide not to attack somebody, you decide not to betray somebody, and that's the next hour of your life.
Well, frankly, I think it's amazing that we've come and met this random bloke sitting in our chair, and he seems to know lots about board games. Frankly, Troy, I'm amazed.
What a coincidence.
But unfortunately, you're gonna have to pay for having.
I'm sorry, I'm guessing I'm gonna go back to listening to the Mountain Goats. I've deleted all the stuff John Stevens from my iPod, so I will pay my money and move forward.
Have you ever been? I've got a question, Troy. I've got a question. Have you ever been knifed in the lungs? Just out of curiosity.
I think it's funny to think about like this violent battle between, John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats and stuff. I think this is the most soft, gentle battle of music ever. Like, it's just not, to Jordan's point, this is, for people who don't like it, this is kind of go to sleep music. And there's lots of stabbing involved.
Did someone say it's not go to sleep music? It's very invigorating, very emotional music.
Yes, I would put Carrie and Lowell as if you put all their albums in a bin, which I guess George just wants to do. But if you put them all in like maybe a giant hat, I would put Carrie and Lowell one. But I think my next two to Tallahassee's next. There's a lot of Mountain Goats before there's the next Sufjan Stevens album, but I like them both. It's a little Sophie's choice for me.
Anyway, well, I've got to go because it's nearly Christmas, and I've got to buy Janine a present, and because if I don't buy her something, she probably won't marry me.
I believe that's how marriage works. Yes, very much so.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm going to talk to Troy about how dull Sufjan Stevens is.
I'll say goodnight, Troy.
Good night.
So my third and final award for the night, Georgios.
I am very excited. What is it? Is it round? Is it square? Is it deep? Is it the award for most colorful game in a monochromatic box?
It's alveolar, Georgios.
That sounds like a part of the female anatomy.
No, it's having pointy ears and an androgynous face. This is the Glenn Close Award for unquieting admiration, and this goes to Ethnos, Georgios.
All right. I can see the admiration, but the other part you have to explain to me.
Well, I'm starting to develop something of a man crush that's quite unseemly on Paolo Mori. It seems he can do nothing wrong. Every game he's put out thus far, I've loved. Mm-hmm. And while I don't think I like Ethnos as much as I like Libertalia, Ethnos got buzz at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah.
And it was touted as the ticket to ride of area control games.
Yeah, I'm not saying I disagree with these comparisons, but I don't like these kinds of comparisons. I don't understand why it has to be. But
this is what people were saying. Yeah. And this initially put me off in the sense that I thought, I don't like games this light. Mm-hmm. But I bought Ethnos just because I like Paolo Mori. And I wanted to see.
It was a pity purchase then.
Exactly. But Ethnos is spectacular. Ethnos offers you all the depth and strategy and contentiousness of an area control game. Mm-hmm. But it strips away all the extraneous fluff. You can do one of two actions on your turn. Mm-hmm. In the way Concordia, you essentially do one thing on your turn. You play a card. This, you can do one of two actions. You can play a band or you can draw a card. This is, I adore the complexity out of simplicity. And Ethnos is the quintessence of that. And I've played Ethnos to death. And I've played Ethnos with people who detest any kind of contention in games.
You're right.
Played Scythe and they just hated it. And not because they thought, well, Scythe might not be very interesting or whatever, but because of the contentious nature. And I don't think Scythe is particularly contentious.
No, there are definitely worse games out there.
And they adored Ethnos because Ethnos is knotty and engaging and it gives you things to do that are fun. Yeah. And if we come close to a game of the year for me, it's absolutely this. I think it's a real achievement and a distillation of what's great about area control games that is unparalleled in my eyes.
Oh yeah. If listeners want to get our in-depth opinions on this game, we reviewed it on the show in episode 44, A House Divided. And I think back then we kind of fell into similar camps we're going to fall in now. I think you were very much in love with it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think it's bad. I think there were some things that were a bit underwhelming, at least in my memory now. It felt a bit I think it's something that I'm going to talk about in the next award I'll present. It seemed a bit calculable. There are certain moments where you could sort of math things out in a way that felt that didn't feel like I was kind of trying to figure out what my chances are here and there. It was closer to, I'm counting this and this and this. This is 2, this is 3. We add this. I get, it seemed very much like it seemed not a math puzzle so much, but I never felt like I was taking a chance when I made a choice so much as I was just calculating the best option and taking that one.
The point is, what makes this game exciting?
Right.
Is those 3 dragon cards.
Yes.
As soon as the 1 dragon card comes out, then so you have mathed out your plans. It's a very rational, very calculable question until that dragon card comes out, and then you just simply have no idea when the round is going to end. Oh, yeah. And so then you end up scrabbling. You've made these beautiful calculations, and then you end up on the edge of your seat thinking, oh my God, am I going to get to achieve what I want? And achieving what you want is really great. And at the same time, just being pipped at the post is also really great.
Right. Yeah, I think this is something that I've learned this year, that the moment a game becomes calculable, it loses a certain appeal for me.
Indeterminable ends, though, I think is a really nice idea in games where you never quite know, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think especially games of the stronger Eurogame school of design benefit from what you call indeterminate endings. I agree. I think, but some games that sort of lost a little of their flavor for me was like Mini Rails, which felt calculable at some points. I think Ethnos as well sort of felt, I wish I wasn't able to do that. I wish I couldn't calculate these things. I wish the game would just dare me to take a chance. I think this is ultimately what it comes down to. I want games to dare me to take a chance. And when they do, I'm very, very happy. But I don't expect everyone to be like me. And like I said, if you want to hear us talk about Ethnos even more in a younger, more optimistic.
Oh, I was wearing flared trousers back then, Georgios.
Yeah, and you had a different beard.
I'm in a play. My beard is absurd. Georgios came into the recording today and was unable to speak to me for the first 5 minutes because he was just completely bamboozled by my beard.
Yes, like I said, I wasn't quite sure whether they're going to start playing some classic rock or we would start in some sort of 70s softcore porn.
I look like Lemmy.
Yeah, kinda.
Well, technically we were supposed to do like 3 of these, but I got writer's block and kind of fell out of it. But that's fine. I you know what? I don't want to be sarcastic forever, so let's talk about some good games I played over the course of the year. You know, it's like, and I played a lot of cool games. I played Gaia Project, which is the Terra Mystica's spiritual successor, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's got a lot of new decisions, and the mechanics are even more integrated. I think it's sweet and nice. And I played Ladder 29, which is by my friends Matt and Ben Pinchback, Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, and I really enjoyed it, which I'm lucky that I did, because I always hate whenever I have friends and they make a game and I kind of don't like it, because then I have to talk around it on a podcast. I have to be like, yeah, it's good, it's cool, you know, I like the art. It's really nice art. But no, in this case, Ladder 29, I think, fixes the problem with like 4 and 5 player trick-taking ladder-style games, and you can actually play it with 4 players without teams, and it's good. I also got to play First Class. I don't know if that counts as last year or not, but anyway, I played it, and I really liked First Class. I'm hoping to get a copy myself. I also enjoyed Bear Park. Bear Park is one of those hot games that everybody needs to buy. It's Tetrominoes, and you put them into your Bear Park. It's great. And Whistle Stop. Whistle Stop was awesome. It's just a combo master paradise, and it takes not very long to play, and I loved it. And again, Century Spice Road and Santorini and Lignum with its logs, and I got to play Lisboa. Oh, Lisboa, just such a nice, meaty Euro game that's so unintuitive, but I loved it. So have a great 2018, and hopefully you'll look back on this 20 years later, when Perfect Information is still around and still now has taken over, the Perfect Information media empire has taken over, and you'll look back at this and you'll say, man, that was such a good time. I remember those times fondly. I wish the show was as good now as it was 20 years ago. So, thanks so much, and happy holidays.
All right, I'm back. Nick Mariner, one last time. This is my big award. This is the award I can't wait to talk about. This award for our show today I have titled the Roy Batty Award for Mechanical Excellence. I don't know if you understand, but I just made my second Blade Runner reference of the episode. Roy Batty was the Rutger Hauer character from Blade Runner. He was a robot. He was an exceedingly well-designed robot. That's a clever pun. Can we dwell for just a moment on how clever of a title that is for a category? Okay, let's get into it. I wanted to award a game. My favorite thing about games, always, is the mechanics. Some neat and unique strategic mechanic that makes it stand out above everything else. I don't really care that much about deep theme. I don't need to feel like I'm doing whatever it says I'm doing. I don't need necessarily like an elaborately drawn story and a character arc and background for what I'm doing. I want some sort of mechanic that's going to make me sit back and say, holy shit, this is awesome. And so I decided to pull a few games this year and award a particular honor to the game that made me say that the most. So very quickly, let me name off my honorable mentions. The one I almost didn't put on this list because I actually just got it and I've only played it the one time, but I really do think it's going to have some legs for me, and that is Import Export. It is a game I'm told is very similar to Glory to Rome. I don't know because I've never played Glory to Rome, but I have played Motainai, which draws from the same idea. It is a multi-use card game where specifically you name an action that you want to take from one of your cards, and then everyone else at the table gets a chance to follow that action. So there are two things that I have said on this show a million times that I love in games. That is multi-use cards, and that is being able to sort of follow the leader. I pick an action, everyone else gets to follow that action mechanic. This game has both, and it's really, really neat. It left my head in a complete scrambled egg position for days afterwards, so I need to play it a few times before I know if I love it, or if maybe it was just a little bit too difficult, because every game like that has a learning curve. But it was really neat, and I think at least worth mentioning for here, that it's a game that's got all of the little mechanical pieces I love, and that's called Import Export. The second runner-up, or the first runner-up, I always forget how this works. The next game I want to talk about that is only a runner-up is Clans of Caledonia. Clans of Caledonia is probably the other game in my top three, along with Ethnos from before, and the one I'm about to mention, which is the best game I've played all year. Clans of Caledonia is so good. I've heard it compared to Terra Mystica a lot, and I don't really like that connection. There's some similarities, but they are distinctly different games. And I don't particularly think that's a useful connection. It's certainly worth having both games in your collection. Clans of Caledonia, area control, you're building up your market, you might be doing dairy, you might be doing scotch, there's all sorts of ways to play the game, individual player powers based on what clan you are and stuff, lots of really, really neat stuff. But what I think is the mechanic that I think is most interesting about Clans of Caledonia is the market. The way that it simulates supply and demand in such a elegant and streamlined fashion. Basically, there's a market board, and when you go into the market, if you buy goods, they become more expensive. If you sell goods, they become less expensive. So if you are flooding the market with wool, you're going to depreciate the cost of all wool. The same in reverse. If you're buying up all the wool, it becomes less stock of it, and so it becomes what's remaining gets more valuable. It's very basic law of supply and demand, but it is done in a way in this game that is so simply done. It's not confusing. You don't have to calculate a million things. It's not some sort of 18xx game where you're going to pull your hair out trying to figure out how to predict the market. It's all very clear. And there's also shipping goods off of contracts, and every time you ship contracts, there are 3 different kinds of goods that go up a particular marker. And they work in precisely the same way. If you ship just tons and tons and tons of tobacco becomes worth the least amount of points at the end of the game because you have saturated the market with that product. Whereas the person next to you who only sold a little bit of cotton, but not enough to make it, to flood the market with it, is going to earn more points off of that cotton. It's so clever. The way that the economy of Clans of Caledonia works is remarkable, and I loved it. I've played it now a couple times. I already can't wait to play it again and see what some of these other factions can do, these other clans. It's a great game. Top 3 game of the year for me, without a single doubt. Unfortunately, it has not piqued my interest the way my winner of this category is. My winner for mechanical excellence goes to my game of the year, I will add, is Gintis. Gintis, if you haven't played it, it still hasn't even made its way over to the States, but I'm pretty important in the hobby, so I've had a chance to play it, which is a nice way of saying that someone in my game group bought it at BGG, and I moved off of play off of his copy. That's what that means. I got to play Gintis. We're going to play it again this weekend, and I already can't wait. Gintis is so fucking good. It's one of those games that makes you say the F word when you want to describe how good it is. It is you sort of like you're growing your civilizations in the Mediterranean and in the age of antiquity and blah blah blah. You know the whole setup. And there's a little bit of area control aspect. You're placing your houses on different regions, and they'll give you reactivating bonuses, which is cool. There are every player has a board where you've got 6 different classes of people, and you're trying to train up certain numbers of people, because to play cards out of your hand you have to have, like, say for instance 2 warriors and 2 scholars or something like that. So you have to figure out how to navigate training the people, and that's all of these strategic decisions are so well put together and well thought out, and there's never a turn where you don't have something weighty to do. But there's a particular mechanic in this game. There's a particular way this game works. It's essentially an action selection game. But every player board has a row of squares across the top. And every action you want to take requires you to take a tile off the board and fill one of those squares. And you must play until all of those squares are filled. You can't ever pass, and you have to keep playing until you've filled all the squares. But when you take an action tile and you put it on your board, every action costs money. You just pay right out. It also costs time. And time is represented in hourglasses, either 1 hourglass or 2 hourglasses. When you take time, you have to take another tile with an hourglass printed on it and also put it on a square on your player board. There's a couple ways you can do this. If it costs 2 time, you can either take 2 single hourglass tiles and fill 2 squares on your board, or you can take an hourglass tile that's got 2 printed on the same square and only fill 1 square on your board. With me so far? I hope so. Because why this matters is at the end of the round, you will clear all the action tiles off of your board and all of the single hourglass tiles off your board as well. Any of those tiles you have put down that have 2 hourglasses on them flip over to the single hourglass side and remain on your board. So essentially what you're doing throughout this game is you're choosing your actions, but you're constantly leveraging how much do I need to get done right now with how much space do I want there to be later. If you fill your board with double hourglass tiles, one square with 2 hourglasses on it, you will get no space back at the beginning of next round. And you're costing yourself all those actions. But the best actions available usually cost 2 hourglasses, so you can't just afford to take the single hourglass things all the time. You really have to up your game. And there is a balance to Gintis, a process of figuring it out that I definitely didn't get. I did not win this game. I sort of went in a area control route with putting buildings down, and I underestimated how important it is to get cards on the board. You really got to get as many cards out of your hand as you can. But the core mechanic of this game, the thing that is just I can't stop thinking about, is that action selection mechanic of manipulating time to what do I need to do now versus what do I need to do later. And it is such a fantastically rewarding game. It seems on the surface like it's super complicated, but it's actually quite simple. You only do one thing on your turn. You pick up a tile, you do that in action, you pay for it in time. I think that this game legitimately could stand next to Concordia in conversation. And if you know anything about me from this show, you know that Concordia is a game that I think is fantastic. It's one of the best games I've ever played. Every time I play it, I think it gets better. Concordia is absolutely brilliant, and I think Gintis has all the right mix of mechanics and simplicity to stand as its equal in that conversation, and that is not speaking hyperbolically. I hope it gets some attention from the Kinderspiel committee this year. It's about that weight, I think. Stop doing these bullshit disposable games and actually give an award to a game that's good. Go back to doing that. There's an idea. And if it doesn't get a Kinderspiel award, it just got the Nick Mariner Roy Batty Award for Mechanical Excellence, and those are practically, I think we can agree, the same thing. I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter at The Good Mariner. Happy holidays, y'all. Happy New Year. Thanks for listening.
So your final award, Georgios?
The final award might be the most contentious award, and let's see if you pick up on as to why. This award is, of course, the well-known and highly regarded and spoken about Mia Wallace Award for invigorating gameplay.
Okay. What do you mean by... Let's define our terms a little first. What do you mean by invigorating?
Invigorating is basically the experience you have, now in this context specifically, sitting down to play a game, and if you are somewhat like us and play games regularly, you don't get so much ennui as a certain...
Familiarity. And sometimes that can be contempt, right?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've been consciously working against, falling into this trap. And I highly recommend people to consciously work against falling into that trap as well. But you do become a little jaded. You've seen it all before. It all seems, all right, this bit from here, this bit from there, they put it together and they added this rule and then it works. Fine. It's kind of the 504 of game design. And, but this game did something simple. It just made me excited about playing games again. It made me love gaming as a whole again. It made me excited to sit down and play with people, to have friends around to play a game. It didn't have to be this game that we played, but I just wanted to have this invigorating experience again of being fired up about playing games.
If you game the amount that we do, you will have periods where you do, but you don't really want to. Or it's maybe not that, but it's just, I could take it or leave it.
Yeah, with me, it's mostly, I sit down, I know what I'm going to get, and I come out of this game going, yeah, it was fine.
And then occasionally you play something.
Yeah.
And it's like the Chinese food of board games. You play it, and 10 minutes later, for the next week, all you want to do is play games again. Not just that game.
Yeah.
Just every other game box on your shelf suddenly glows with a bit more attraction,
Right. I do want to, unfortunately, before we recorded, I did sort of spoil you what this game is, because I do wonder whether people would be able to guess what this game might be. Because I'm not sure I've talked about it on the show at all. I might have talked about it on Twitter though. Well, first of all, it's not an Essen release.
It's not a game I've played either.
That is true. And it's all right. Let's do a long-winded build-up. It's a game that had some controversy around it, and I think, like most board game controversies, it came down to the fact that the people involved were not as professional about things as they could have been.
Yeah.
I've talked to when we met some famous game designers and podcasters in Essen. I talked to them about this. Gil Hover, for example, and the game that invigorated me again, the game that made me excited about playing games again, is Insider by Oink Games, and it's a simple, small game. It's basically
20 questions, right?
20 questions with a almost traitor mechanism. And the reason why it's invigorating, the reason why it blew my mind, the reason why I love playing it every time is simple but so profound. Because we all know these kind of social deduction games, social deduction games where one player has no information, has to fake it, or where certain players have a certain amount of information and their goal is to confuse others, to lead them astray, to sort of plant doubts and seeds of mistrust among other players, like in Resistance, or, well, most social deduction games, actually. Insider does not do that. Instead, Insider puts you on the side of the good guys. The so-called traitor or insider knows something that everybody else wants to know. And you as the insider want to help them. You want to get to sort of aid them in reaching their goal, which is guessing the word within this time limit through yes or no questions. So you're not blocking them. You're not confusing them. You're not doing anything negative to them. You want to help them, but you don't want to give yourself away.
Does it feel like Mysterium to some degree?
No, because Mysterium sort of...
You have information.
Yeah.
You have information that you want to impart.
Right.
But you have restrictions on how you can impart the information, which is exciting and frustrating at all the same time, right? Does it, I'm not saying it's mechanically similar, but does it feel similar?
No, not really. I mean, if you really squint your eyes, you can sort of see some parallels in that you're both trying to help each other. But with Mysterium, it's clear that you're helping each other. Nobody's doubting you at any point.
Okay.
With Mysterium, you react to what people are saying and pick your cards accordingly. With Inside, on the other hand, and I made fun of the box blurb when they talked about, does such a thing as free will exist? And it's pretentious. It's absolutely absurd. And while I still think it's pretentious and absurd, I can see what they were going for.
Right.
Because what you end up playing is you're trying to influence people without them noticing it. You're trying to plant these seeds of not doubt, but conviction into their heads without giving yourself away. And this puts you in such a weird, exciting new position in the way you approach the game and the way you approach other players. You're not, even though you're not winning together, you are trying to help them win. And this is amazing. This small change leads to such a fundamentally different relationship between you and everybody else at the table. And I love playing this game. I love the challenge of getting these of guessing this one word, because it's just the range of words is just so broad and so at times so obscure, and so the range is so wide, but the words themselves are so specific, so detailed that you can't. I mean, there's a game we played with in German, obviously, and our German listeners will realize just how absurd this is. But but you expect words like flower, house. You don't expect a word like Volkshochschule, which in German exists, and in certain circles it does pop up now and then. But for most people,
in my circles, it does quite a lot.
Yeah,
because
but
I teach English.
Exactly, but outside of that circle, you will not hear this word. So the likelihood of somebody figuring out this word on their own is very small. And as an insider trying to get people.
It means night school, basically.
Yeah, I think
it's a night school, basically.
Yeah, I think it's interesting enough. There's some weird things in the translation, but they kind of add to the charm. I think the multilingual version that I'm using has community college as it, which kind of works as well.
And again,
you would not use this word in normal German conversation. So getting them to guess this word takes a lot of effort, but it's such an amazing challenge to get them to guess the word without figuring out that you planted this idea in their heads. And I'm ranting. I'm loving this game. It's small. It's tight. It's amazing. It just made me fall in love with games all over again. Because I've mentioned this before, to me, games are about how we relate to each other, what we do with each other, to each other. And a game that moves off the beaten path of what games usually do. Like most games put us on a collision course. Some games try to put us on a passive-aggressive collision course. Some games put us on the same side. But this is the first game I've played where you're kind of on the same side, but one person is subtly guiding you and does not want the rewards for it. And I don't know, something else just, clicks with me on a deep level. And I just love playing it. I love sitting down. I love figuring things out. I love the way you have to think about what people are thinking about. I mean, it literally forces you to look at the world through other people's eyes and say the things that they need to hear to say the things that you want them to say. And that's, I don't know. I know of no other game that does this. And it's so elegant.
So here we are at the end of our awards ceremony. The celebrities are filing out now.
And they're filing lawsuits because they have figured out that it's an audio show and none of them will be seen.
And so, as we stand here, Georgios, at the end of the evening, the gala evening where I've drunk champagne and
I've watched you drink champagne.
Any games that should be on the list that aren't on the list?
Ooh.
Nominees. Honorable menciones.
Honorable mentions. There are a lot of games. I think I'm going to just mirror what I said in our SM preview video. Oh, we did a video once, remember? There are a bunch of games that had a lot of buzz. There are a bunch of games that people talked about. And back then I made the conscious decision to not worry about them. I'll see them sooner or later, and I'm not going to hunt them down. Azul was one of them. Charterstone was another, which I know you pre-ordered, and it's in your possession now. Nusfjord was yet another game. Merlin, Noria, all these kind of games that were, hyped by a lot of people. I will see them eventually. I didn't feel the need to hunt them down, and some of them I still haven't hunted down. I'm just not too bothered about it. I guess some of these games are probably worth a mention. I'm basing this on what I've heard. As I mentioned earlier, I've played Spirit Island. I think it's good, but not great, for reasons similar to what I've said earlier about some game. I don't remember which. Pandemic Season 2 is an odd beast, but I can say that I don't think it's on the same level as Season 1. I think if you've enjoyed Season 1, you should play Season 2. I think if you weren't interested in Season 1, you probably aren't interested in Season 2, and you probably won't get anything out of it either. Or much out of it. What other big games are there? I think.
Well, my honourable mention is just based upon a game I've yet to play. You've already mentioned, and I'm mentioning it just because it's kind of it's my game version of awarding Obama the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago.
Well, that's absolutely not.
You know, the award, you award it in hope of it fulfilling what you wish.
Okay.
And that's Charterstone.
Right.
You just said it. I have it. I'm literally looking at it right now. And I'm waiting. I'm getting some friends over from England, and we're going to play through the whole thing in 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
And I think this will be the game I love this year. I hope this will be the game I love this year.
I hope so too. I've heard all kinds of things about the game, and I do hope you love it.
There are a few designers that I admire as much as Jamie Stegmaier, because I think he does everything brilliantly well. He gives you artifacts that you feel proud to own. He designs games that are tight and interesting and rewarding. And he treats you as a consumer, and this shouldn't be a factor, and it will not be a determining factor in whether I like the game or not, but he's so available all the time, and so open and so generous with his time to people who speak to him. I'm a member of the Charterstone Facebook group.
Right.
And almost every post a person puts, there's a comment from Jamie on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not just a hope, but also a will for it to be good, because I think decent people should be rewarded simply for being decent, because there's so much indecency around us. So here we are, Georgios, the end of another year.
Yeah, the after party of this celebrity-filled award show was amazing.
I'm absolutely wrecked, Georgios.
Yes, you are.
And now I have to return to the normal monochrome everyday life, and it's dreadful.
Well, I don't.
No, but, I mean, your life is an endless carnival.
It is, yeah.
Of telling people how they can contact us.
Pretty much, yeah. They can use our website. It's infoperfected.com. They can write us an email at infoperfected@gmail.com. They can tweet at us at infoperfected or at perfectedinfo. They can, what else is there? There's this Facebook, which is the Perfect Information Podcast. There is Instagram, which is Perfect Information. Apparently we are also on Stitcher.
Yeah, we are indeed.
We are also on the Patreon for now, which was a bit of a debate. Well, there was a bit of a flare-up with Patreon, you might have noticed.
Well, I want to talk about this briefly.
Go on.
Because we've lost a few patrons.
We did, yes.
And, I mean, the thing that annoyed me about that is not that people left. I completely understand why.
Yeah, I never understood why they gave us money in the first place.
It's just that Patreon never told us these people had left. We had to sort of go in ourselves and see, which is a little bit underhanded, but the upshot of this is people have complained and they're not bringing in these charges.
Yes.
So if you funded us before, the same conditions apply to you now as they did previously.
Yes.
And so if you got out and think, thank God, I was just needing the excuse, then fine. You can stay away, that's cool. But if you want to refund us, that's fine too. That would be, I mean, absolutely wonderfully, gratefully accepted.
Yes.
Because we want to move towards this becoming, to feeling like a proper job. And it's only through you that we can do this. We want to do things like buy our own review copies of games. We want to do things like expand our visual as well as our audio output.
Yeah, you bringing up the visual is a touchy subject, yeah.
And this can only be done through allocation of time. And I'm a freelancer, and so any time I take off to do this, I'm not being paid. And I don't want this to come across as any sort of violin moaning thing. I love doing this, and I walked into this knowing that this was the case, but we can expand, we can do more, but only through the support of people who listen to us.
That is true. Which brings up another side topic. Do let us know if you are interested in alternative ways of supporting us, because we've been talking about this while we don't record. We've been thinking about some options, and we're not quite sure whether to go through with them or not. Send us your feedback. You can also send us an email, maybe tweet at us, go to the Guild number 2348 on Board Game Geek. Let us know what you think about the current support structures, and if you think there are and should be other ways of supporting the show.
Yeah, because fundamentally, it's about you and giving you what we can.
That's the great way of phrasing, please give us your money.
And now, Georgios, as it's Christmas Day, and we're recording this on Christmas Day...
Yes, again, very live.
You should probably get away back to your family.
Well...
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm going to have to make a few phone calls.